Welcome into another edition of the Gig'em 24/7 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, joined as always by Brian Perroni. Brian, we've made it to the dead period. After a busy month of camps and official visits, how was your weekend? Kind of, this was a bit quieter of a weekend for the most part, really.
Yeah, I mean A&M still had what, four official visitors, but I
For
mean it was
yeah,
the smallest of the month, and the dead period started on Monday,
yeah,
and so you think that's going to be relatively quiet, but I think Monday had more commitments across the country than any other day that I've seen. Sunday night and Monday were just crazy because I think all these kids now they've taken visits, they want to get their spots locked up, so they're getting a spot in a class. I also think these coaches want to take vacations, so they want to get these kids locked down before they head out of town because this is really the only July is really the only time of year they can truly take a vacation anymore. So, it's like, oh, let's get all these locked down and then, turn out the lights when you head out of town. So, yeah, it was the dead period Monday, but it may have been the busiest, so far the busiest day in the recruiting cycle.
Yep, and A&M was one of those. Landed a commitment from Katy Pato linebacker Damien Sanford. We'll touch on him for sure in this podcast. I don't think anybody's had a better month of June than he has. He saw his recruitment really take off this past month and went ahead and made his decision. I know Brian, you spoke to him on Monday, and you're right. I mean, this is kind of the last break for coaches. Obviously, there's that week in July that I think kids are going to try to get out to as many schools as they can as well. But really, before the season starts now, there's like 1 week of recruiting, and pretty much it's kind of a chance to breathe, and because you kind of go right from the season into signing day into evaluation period. So,
Yeah, well,
this
I
is
mean,
kind of the one chance.
even that July date heads basically straight into
Fall
fall
camp.
camp after that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, this really is, just their only time. And I think, you see the coaches were definitely happy that this July dead period got put in. It was originally put in, I think now probably 8 or 9 years ago now, and I think the main reason is that was the time of year that the opening was held at the Nike headquarters in Oregon.
Yep.
And even though Beaverton's just outside of Portland, all these kids would somehow, make their way down to the University of Oregon campus in Eugene, which is, a couple hours drive away. But so Oregon was getting, all the top 150 players in the country were all down the street from them, and they were just getting all these kids on campus in July when other schools weren't. So I think that's probably the impetus for what happened. And yeah, coaches they definitely don't mind this time of not having any visitors.
Yep, no chance for some vacations, and I know Jimbo went to Africa last year, obviously, which we talked about. So just a chance to recharge the batteries. And media days are only a couple of weeks away, really. But getting into the big news from Monday, Texas A&M landing their first commitment in just over 2 months. They had kind of that run of the three right after the spring game with Braven Rogers, Javon Thomas, and Tyler White. Then land Damien Sanford, who, for those who haven't kind of followed his story, at the beginning of June, he had some interest, but did a private workout with Texas A&M and tested off the charts. His athleticism, and he was really productive at Katy Pato as this past season as well. So it was kind of a bit surprising that his recruitment had kind of stayed under the radar, but from there things kind of just exploded for him. And but that Texas A&M offer really meant a lot. And I know, Brian, you spoke to him yesterday about that. He kind of knew when he got that A&M offer kind of where he kind of had his mind at, and went ahead and made the decision on Monday. And it's a big ad for A&M to get a linebacker in the class. Obviously, still going for guys like Anthony Hill and Darian Gillette. But this is a big first one to get, and a guy who could definitely see his rating continue to rise over the course of the fall.
Yeah, so I had put in a crystal ball for Sanford on Friday, I think, and I had said, I expect all four services that make up the composite. I think will end up they'll keep making them rise, just like schools are discovering him. I think the recruiting services, are also, getting to see him more. I think a big reason with the schools offering is that he's gotten a lot bigger. He was a bit of an undersized linebacker before, but the interesting thing is that all those offers that he picked up, it was TCU on the very 1st of June, and then A&M, Texas, LSU, and Alabama, I think in that order. I'm not positive about the TCU one, but the other ones, A&M, Texas, LSU, and Alabama, he was on campus for all those, and I believe he had workouts at all of them. He might not have at Texas, but I think he did. So they're all offering after they see him in person and working out. So these aren't just like, hey, this kid's sort of blowing up, let's throw our hat in the ring.
Yeah.
They got a chance to see him in person. They were really impressed by what they saw. I mean, Alabama every year, A&M is becoming on that level too, where they can pick and choose who they want from across the country. But Alabama and Nick Saban have long been like that, and the fact that they offered during, right before his senior year at camp means they really liked him and really liked what they had to
Yeah.
see, and that was the same thing with A&M. I mean, I don't even he wasn't even expecting an offer, and I don't think he expected to absolutely blow A&M away like he did.
Yeah, and like we mentioned, it was with his broad jump numbers, and some of those were just really really good. And to your point, I thought that was one of the cooler parts of the story was, um, you mentioned he kind of teared up when he started to get that offer and just what it meant for him and his family. It really meant a lot. And it's linebacker's probably one of the biggest needs in this class for A&M, and so to get a guy like that has the true athleticism and range that he has to be able to cover and come off the edge, I think is really really huge, and to get him in the boat early as well, and start to generate some momentum as well heading into July. Um, the other big news of the weekend, and we've talked, it feels like ad nauseum over the last couple of weeks about this. Jaden Rashada, as expected over the past week, picks Miami this past weekend.
Also, by the
And
way,
so
last week we talked about Rashada, and it looked like he was going to Florida at that time, and I
yeah,
think
and
they said,
things
"Hey,
kind of the
look at all the different schools that have been leaders in the last month or so. It had been Ole Miss, and then Oregon, and then Florida, and we're like, even though he's got an announcement planned for this coming weekend, that's what we were saying last week.
yeah.
It could be a totally different school, and guess what? It was a totally different school. It was the one that got him on that final official visit.
And it kind of felt like that could be something. Obviously, there's a reason he pushed back his commitment when he did, and to be able to get that final look at Miami, and things kind of turned on a dime there, and it's obviously it's a big win for Miami to get him in the fold. And Dante Moore, A&M had him. I was speaking to a few folks about him last week, and Oregon kind of feels like the school right now that has the most momentum for him. And so A&M puts an offer on the table for Austin Novosad, and we've been talking about him for it feels like the past 2 months, and just say ever since Eli Holstein kind of decommitted to keep him on the radar. And A&M does put an offer on the table. He was in town for the state 7-on-7 tournament, and I thought it looked really sharp. He went up against DJ Lagway, and Dripping Springs ended up holding on for a win there. A bit of a controversial call, actually. There was a pass interference called, and I guess Willis didn't have the chance to really decline the penalty and keep the touchdown, so they kind of had to go for it again and didn't end up getting it. And so just a really weird ending to that game. But Novosad, he's looked really impressive wherever he's gone. He's picked up the Ohio State offer, obviously. They're in the mix as well. Makes really quick decisions. The ball comes out of his hand really, really well, especially on intermediate routes. It feels like he's really accurate in that front. And I think A&M, it was kind of interesting to follow this. You and I have talked about this quite a bit. I think A&M needed to offer this weekend and get into the mix. Obviously, he's got
Yeah,
Elite
we
11.
had said that. We had said that on here. Said if A&M's going to offer, it has to be now, and
Yeah,
and
and
they did. It didn't come as a surprise when he was on campus that he was
yeah, he's
offered.
going to go to Elite 11, and that gets underway today on Tuesday. And guys are kind of arriving in town. They took a quick vacation as well in between, just as a family. And I think once he gets back from there, he'll start to figure things out. And I definitely get the sense talking to him that he wants this out the way, so he can start turning his focus towards his high school season and kind of be done with recruiting as well. So I would expect something to happen pretty quickly after he gets back from Elite 11.
Yeah,
Just the
you
sense I
described
got.
him as a guy who makes quick decisions, and even though the A&M offer is brand new and the Ohio State offer is pretty new, it came earlier this month, and then he took an official after that. I think he's going to decide between those three relatively soon after he gets back from Elite 11. He wants it out of the way, and he wants him to be locked down, whether he chooses to stay with Baylor or A&M or Ohio State, or a bit of a wild card. He did visit Georgia. They haven't offered yet, but he did visit Georgia, and if they offer, it could throw a wrench in things. But I don't think it would be. I think he's happy with the three choices with Baylor, Ohio State, and A&M, and I think Baylor is probably sweating A&M the most, and for good reason at this point. I mean, the Aggies have been recruiting him a long time. He's from an A&M family. I mean, he's been at came to camp last year, really hoping for that offer. They ended up, taking Eli Holstein right after. So, I think Jimbo Fisher was able to sort of smooth that over, and he realized, hey, yeah, they had a kid committed, and they were going after some others, but I don't think he's a consolation prize. I don't think A&M views him as a
Right.
consolation prize, but even if so, he's a really good consolation prize. I mean, he's a guy
Yeah.
we've mentioned on the boards for a while. I think even when Holstein was still committed, mentioned him on the board, says, hey, him and Jackson Arnold are the top QBs in Texas, sort of by far. And
Yeah.
they're not as far apart as their rankings at the time. At the time, Novosad was a 3-star. Everybody's come around more on him now, and he's a 4-star, and he keeps going higher. I mean, we are saying, yeah, these guys are head and shoulders better than anybody else. And let's say he ends up at A&M. Everybody sort of pencil and Wigman in as this like multiple year starter, but Austin Novosad is not going to roll over. And I mean, it wouldn't be like a huge upset if he down the road and he and Wigman are the two guys going after it. If he won the job, it wouldn't be a huge upset. Nobody would be like just floored, because he's really good.
Yeah, really good. And it just, kind of getting a chance to kind of watch him this weekend. One of the big takeaways within a couple throws, you just quickly notice how well the ball comes out of his hand. And he's got a really sharp delivery. Honestly, I know everybody has kind of, jumped on DJ Lagway in the 2024 class, and rightfully so. Of the two guys, kind of the two of them going head to head, Austin Novosad had the better day, and
Oh
so
yeah, Novosad is more polished at the moment for sure.
and
Lagway's potential is through the roof, but Novosad's more polished
yeah,
right
and
now.
Lagway certainly had his moments as well, but I just thought Austin Novosad looked really really sharp. Kudos to the Mesquite Horn secondary, because they were kind of the one team that kind of gave Lagway and Novosad some problems in terms of their
I
length
mean, I
and
think their
size in
whole
the second.
secondary is D1. People,
Yeah.
they started out with some smaller offers. Now DJ Coleman's committed to Baylor, and I think one of the other guys committed to North Texas. But yeah, their secondary's
Um,
loaded. So
their secondary and just the length and size there. So kudos. I mean, they had a really good afternoon on Friday, but yeah, it's going to be a really interesting storyline to kind of watch. And yeah, again, I don't expect it to last too long once this week is kind of done with Elite
so
11.
we haven't really talked about this. So I may be putting you on the spot here. What does A&M do? Let's say Novosad sticks with Baylor. Where does A&M go at quarterback?
Boy, that's really interesting. A guy that I'm a big fan of, and I think would be really interesting if A&M were to get into the mix. I don't know whether you'd be interested or not, but Jake Strong's a guy that makes really sharp decisions. He's committed to
He's a
Texas Tech.
Texas Tech commit out of Justin
Texas Tech
Northwest.
commit right now. Was at A&M's camp last summer, and I remember both you and I kind of noticed this, that Jimbo Fisher had a lot of praise for him, and we talked about it last summer about his ball placement, his accuracy, whether A&M would choose to target a guy like that. Marcel Reed, they could try to go after him at Ole Miss. He's a guy they've shown interest in the past.
Yeah, he was at camp
I
last
think
summer as
those.
well.
I think
Maybe
those would be
Ricky Collins out of Baton Rouge. Now he's
maybe
committed
Ricky
to Purdue at
Collins.
the moment, but both LSU and Florida State are trying to trying to flip him, and A&M could get more involved there. They offered him at one point, but
And I know Brock Lynn's a name that gets mentioned amongst a bunch of schools that, depending on what happens with Rashada and Moore. Where do you think they'd go? Where do you think?
I honestly don't know. I mean, it would sort of
Yeah.
have to be reset again, because I think this whole time it's been clear, even when they offered Rashada and Moore and Pierce Clarkson, it was those guys and Novosad. I mean, it was
Yeah.
because they remained in contact. So if all four of those are just off the board, I think A&M resets itself. Maybe even looks at a complete sleeper like Cade Tessier, a guy from Montgomery Lake Creek High School, which
Yeah.
they got to decide which they are. You can't be Lake and Creek. I grew up, I went to Clear Lake, and our rival was Clear Creek, and it was Lake and Creek. So, but Montgomery Lake Creek, he had an incredible day at A&M, and it's a guy they had asked to come because they liked his workout film. So, maybe a complete sleeper like that, but I would expect, like a Ricky Collins or Marcel Reed or something like that for A&M to go after if things don't happen. But I do like where they're at with Novosad. It's nothing's a done deal. He hasn't told anybody anything, but I do like the position. I think A&M, would rather be in their spot at the moment than anybody else's.
I do too. And, even, just having some conversations over the last couple of months, this doesn't catch Baylor by surprise at all with Novosad. When I was talking with some folks after Eli Holstein decommitted, one of the first things they kind of thought about is, well, is A&M going to jump into the mix for Novosad? And I think they're very cognizant that he's an A&M legacy, and his ties there are very, very strong. And so this is certainly something that Baylor has been kind of keeping an eye on and sweating for a little while now. And now it just comes a time for him to ultimately see if he makes the jump or not. And one thing I don't think is this delay them waiting until July. I think you and I have talked about this before, but once Jimbo Fisher kind of gets in a room and kind of outlines his plan and talks, things get smoothed over very quickly. And so I don't think there's going to be any issues with that. I think it's ultimately going to come down to, does he want to stick with Baylor, who was one of the first to jump in, or does he make the move to A&M or Ohio State as well? It's going to be interesting to watch over the next couple of weeks. And I think once A&M gets a quarterback in the fold, you'll start to see the momentum and who they're able to recruit around and be able to point to. I will say too, I talked to a lot of kids this week, and I was down at State 7-on-7 last week, and kind of got the pulse talking to kids about who have seen Austin Novosad. They've seen Jaden Rashada. They've seen Dante Moore. And a lot of prospects kind of talked about, Austin Novosad can really, really play, and they've got a lot of respect for him. He's got a lot of respect amongst his peers, which is not the case. They're when you don't have the microphone on, they'll give you the honest opinion. They had high praise for Dante Moore and Jaden Rashada, but a lot of guys had a lot of high praise for Austin Novosad too, and what his skill set really is. So
no, for sure. And a QB room of Connor Wigman and Austin Novosad would be something that a receiver would look at and like, for sure.
No doubt. Speaking of committed prospects, A&M also had a couple other committed prospects on campus this weekend. Got Peyton Bowen back on campus for another unofficial visit. Bowen's been committed to Notre Dame since January, but has taken unofficial visits to a couple different schools, and right now has continued to maintain he's locked in on his commitment to Notre Dame. But I don't think it's a bad thing to just continue getting him on campus.
No, and if somebody is completely locked in, they're not even taking unofficial visits. So there's definitely interest on his part. He comes from Denton Guyer, a school that A&M has recruited well. I mean, they have Eli Stowers and Deuce Harmon on the roster, at this point, that, helps. And it's also, this is usually the time of year that players, if they make really early commitments like he did, they start to realize distance is a bit of a factor. They didn't really consider that, or, just sort of tabled it. And now they're starting to realize that. So I think A&M will be able to sell distance too.
No doubt. And, even getting him back on campus for, a game this fall, maybe getting him back for the pool party, which which they've talked with a lot of kids about this month. I know somebody asked when the official visit, when the list will come out. That'll be a couple weeks from now when they start finalizing plans.
Yeah, a lot of
But
kids always say, "Yeah, I'll be there," but this will be loaded. It's going once again. It's going to have kids from across the country that'll
yeah,
all be in town again that final weekend in July.
no doubt. And I would caution the people who on the board have made these, posts that A&M is getting, steamrolled in recruiting and all this stuff. Patience, things. It's
Yeah,
only
I was like,
June.
well, yeah. Ever
It
since he's been in Florida State, Jimbo Fisher has been a closer.
yeah,
He will always close strong, and also right now A&M is recruiting nationally with
yeah.
recruiting the best of the best. Those guys don't commit early. They just don't.
They don't.
You
They
know,
don't.
a
So,
few may, but I mean, don't. I mean, do A&M fans? It's like they've already forgotten the early signing day from last year, or
yeah,
even the later signing
exactly.
day with picking up commitments on that day. Shamar
Yeah.
Stewart and Jacoby Matthews and all these guys committing late. It's like just chill. Right
Just take
now,
a
A
deep
and M
breath.
A&M had never even had Walter Nolan in town at this time a year ago. He
Exactly.
was the jewel of the class last year. So
So give it until
yeah,
the pool party,
can you be
and
patient? Just be
can you be
patient. No,
patient?
yeah, it'll, yeah,
I've
no,
seen those posts. I've seen a lot of them of our recruiting's a mess, right?
I know
All
Aggie
that
fans
stuff.
have been burned in the past. When
Yep.
they've been sold optimism, and then A&M has not closed strong, but Fisher has proven. Yeah, I mean, okay, last year again, A&M doesn't have enough spots. They're not going to break the record from last year, but this is going to
Yeah.
be another really good
Strong
class.
class. Yeah.
Like there's been a couple guys have come off the board. Tony Mitchell, obviously, they really wanted. He went to committed to Bama over the weekend. They'll keep recruiting him, but he came off the board. Harris Sewell most likely headed to Clemson this week when he announces. So,
Yeah.
some guys, yeah, they've lost out on, but most of their, Ruben Owens, we talked about to Louisville. We said that's not over,
Yeah.
but most of their targets are still uncommitted
Yep.
or they're committed to other schools and they came on campus like the other
Yeah. And
official
so
visitor this weekend.
the other one was Zachariah Branch, and this was also a return trip for him. And all the indications are he really enjoyed his trip. Is he going to flip right away? No, but I think the feeling with him is just continue to get him back on campus, just continue to plug
Oh yeah.
away. There's a
Because
long way to
he's
go
supposed
until
to be
early
back for
signing,
the pool party.
and
The
he's
one
supposed
thing,
to be back for the
he's been committed to USC for a while now. I think since Christmas Eve,
yep,
something like that, maybe New Year's Eve. But he's been committed to USC for a while. His brother just signed with USC in the 22
yep,
class, Ion
and
Branch safety. So that's definitely helping the Trojans and distance, from Las Vegas. But for this being, he took an official to A&M the weekend after he had taken official to USC's huge weekend. I think they had 20 something official visitors.
yeah,
Like,
they had a
I don't even know
ton.
how you keep track of that many, but they had their huge weekend. And for him to rave about it and for, just reports that we've heard from sources and things like that, how well it went coming straight off a USC visit. I mean, that's about all that, as much as A&M could have hoped for, for the top receiver in the country to be on campus and to be truly considering A&M, despite having been a longtime commit to Lincoln Riley and also having a brother that just signed with USC.
No doubt, it'd be one thing if he just came on the visit and kind of said, "I'm gonna stick with USC," but to come off that official visit and then already be kind of eyeing a return visit for the pool party later in the summer is a good sign for A&M. And again, just keep plugging away on that and keep getting him on campus as many times as you can and being able to talk to him. And I think with a guy like that, and other guys, speaking to Jalen Hale this weekend, he's going to take his 3 official visits during the fall. And it's going to be interesting. We've talked about it before where he kind of fits into the wide receiver. I think Georgia and USC are kind of the 2 schools right now that have set the bar with these 2 official visits. And he certainly said that those 2 are probably the top 2 because I've taken the official visits there.
Yeah.
And where he's eyeing official visits to Texas A&M, Texas, and Alabama during the fall. But with Branch, if you start to show him a strong passing game, if you can sell off of Evan Stewart having a big year, getting early playing time, and I think that'll start to quell some of the concerns. It only takes really 1 to 2 guys to really, and Chris Marshall too. He doesn't get mentioned enough as well, but if he takes off as well, you have a couple guys there that you can really, really sell in terms of wide receiver production, and those concerns will start to to go away. I think, he's a guy that's going to be watching A&M's passing game and watching what happens there. And, A&M just kind of has to be patient and continue to get him on campus and continue talking to him. And as long as he's open to it, you've got a chance. But you're right. I mean, his brother signing with USC certainly helps the Trojans. Distance certainly plays a factor there as well. But, this is his second trip to A&M. So certainly something to keep note of. And then another big target who was on campus this weekend again for another trip. He's been on campus several times is Malik Muhammad. And, he's also looking to get back for the pool party in late July. And big to get him on campus, I think, because, Texas has kind of created some buzz with him over the past couple of weeks and months. And so to get him on campus and be able to reestablish footing there, I think was big to get him back right before the dead period.
Yeah, and he's also looking at Alabama, and Alabama just picked up a 5-star cornerback commit in Tony Mitchell. Alabama may tell him Tony's a safety, and he very well could be, but cornerbacks aren't like other positions. You really only play one or two. One at each spot, though. You don't rotate them. So, it's not like defensive line where you can recruit 8 guys and say, hey, that means you get to be in a rotation with these other guys. Corners don't want to be in a rotation, then there's not going to be. So, maybe that helps A&M. Who knows? And he's got a teammate committed to A&M as well, and cornerback Javon Thomas. So yeah, it definitely helped to get him back because A&M definitely had the momentum at one point and wants to get that back and is still in good shape. I mean, I think, I've had a crystal ball on A&M with him. And I think A&M is still probably the best shape. But, yeah, Texas has made things interesting. And, I mean, like it or not, they, just with their recruiting weekend after picking up Archman and got, some others and then got Derek Williams yesterday. So they do have a lot of momentum and buzz. So, picking up a lot of in-state offensive linemen. So yeah, any kind of momentum A&M can use to counter that is going to be positive.
No doubt. And, Billy Walton reopening his commitment and, Texas getting some buzz there. It's important to have Javon Thomas in the mix. And Javon Thomas, somebody asked about this a couple weeks ago, if Javon Thomas is, and especially Bravian Rogers are big recruiters. I've kind of heard from behind the scenes, Javon Thomas very much is recruiting guys. He's very
they're both quiet. They're both quiet guys to us, but I do think, they both talk to others. Like Bravian Rogers has been to campus the past 3 weekends. I don't know if he was this past weekend, but the 2 before that, he was on campus recruiting, which is big because he had also been to LSU for a weekend earlier in June. So him being in there, and for sure A&M doesn't have the Bobby Taylor this year. And I mean, you rarely see quite that much anyway. I mean, shoot, Bobby Taylor's now taking the lead on Zachariah Branch as well. He was at the photo shoot there, but they don't have that. But they do have, guys like, Colton Thomason, behind the scenes, working to land guys and, keep staying in Johnny Bowen's ear, even with Bowen's visiting Oregon. So these guys, it's not as in your face as Bobby was, but I think they're still our leaders and they're still our guys that love A&M.
No doubt. And, just speaking of Colton Thomason, he's really involved with a lot of the offensive line guys. Obviously, Clemson with the buzz for Harris Sewell would be a blow for A&M, but he's been in the ear of TJ Shanahan and talking to some people
Colton's
last week,
been working on TJ Shanahan for a while, and TJ mentioned Colton to me as a guy that he knows.
And that's someone talking to some people last week. It feels like LSU and A&M are kind of the two. Georgia's in the mix as well. But it feels like those kind of 3 schools are the ones that have caught his attention so far. So still plenty of of guys still on the board on that front as well. But with the season around the corner, things and just 1 week of recruiting to go. Obviously the fall is going to be a big influence as well with the early signing period 6 months away at this point. We're going to look at what sort of impact the season might have on recruiting and some other key storylines heading into the fall, coming back right after a quick break. Welcome back to the Gig'em 24/7 Sports Podcast. Brian, the season is 67 days away. For those of you not looking, there's a great countdown that is happening on the Gig'em 24/7 Twitter and Facebook. If you want to keep up to date on how many days to go until the season, but it's gonna be big for A&M. Obviously, coming off an 8-4 season, the number one recruiting class. A lot of people have talked about this being a big year for A&M to kind of bounce back and kind of show that next step that they can get into championship contention on a regular basis. Get into the 10-11 win range, and I think that's going to be big because I think there's a lot of guys that are waiting to see what A&M kind of looks like, what the defense kind of looks like with Mike Elko moving on to Duke and under DJ Durkin. And specifically at the wide receiver spot, I think, that's going to be really big. We talked about Evan Stewart and Chris Marshall before, just to show something in the passing game and be able to show that, a guy like Evan Stewart can come on campus and see time early. Jalen Hale talked a lot about that, about, talking with Evan Stewart. He used to train with him. Brian, for you, what do you think? What sort of impact do you think the season will have on recruiting, or do you think A&M will just kind of be able to recruit regardless?
Well, usually, with kids making decisions so early these days, usually it pays off in the next class. So I'd look more for that. But receivers, yes. I mean, A&M is in on some big time receivers. Zachariah Branch, Hakeem Williams from Fort Lauderdale, Jonte Cook still. Even if he commits to Texas, they're still going to continue to recruit him. Several
Andy
other
Jean,
big time guys. Yeah, Andy Jean down from also in South Florida. Some Micah Tees from Oklahoma. These guys are all going to be watching A&M closer this fall because outside of Jonte Cook, I don't think any of them are ready to make decisions anytime soon. So yeah, they'll be watching that. And the fact that Evan Stewart is just such a big personality. I mean, if he does well, the college football world will know that he does well because I don't even know how many followers he has on TikTok, but I know he's like a legit influencer, whatever that exactly means. But, and every recruit knows him. So there will be a lot of eyes. So the receiver position is the one that this season is really going to have an effect on. But I would say most of the guys, it'd be the 2024 class that's more affected by the upcoming season.
And I think A&M will also have a chance. They obviously just recruited a ton of guys to that defensive line, and we've talked about it. I think they'll also be able to quell some of those questions about how they're going to use all of them. And that's one of the things. When you talk to people, A&M, how they're going to be able to play all those guys and show that. I think one of the things they'll be able to sell off of moving forward after, provided they can show it this fall, this is a blueprint going forward that, we can recruit a deep bunch of guys, and this is how we're going to rotate them and all that sort of stuff. I think that's the other big thing they'll be able to show this season. But, I think the other part to it is A&M went 8-4 last year and was still able to recruit, the number one class of all time for 24/7. So, expectations are certainly high, and I think A&M and Jimbo Fisher will be the first to tell you that they really want to put together a more consistent season, especially at the quarterback spot, and be more explosive in the passing game. And receiver will obviously be the big kind of question mark. But I think your point's valid that the 2024 class and being able to generate some early momentum there, especially if they can get into the conversation for the college football playoff, or at least be playing on a New Year's Six bowl, I think will certainly help.
Yeah, I mean that means they've beaten maybe beaten Alabama, beaten LSU, who all recruit really well, beaten Miami, who not only is supposed to be really good this year, but is also now a major recruiting like rival of A&M's with A&M going into South Florida. So yeah, if they can get that momentum, that will help a ton. And that will help some with the 23 class, but really that 24 class. Because if we talk about it takes a year, it's delayed by a year. Well, how did A&M do the year before this record-setting 2022 class signed? Well, they had their highest finish since 1939, in the COVID-shortened season. So, we finished number 4 in the country. You're going to get some buzz. And so, that helped a ton. And now you're recruiting off of potential and sort of the future with, hey, look at these guys we got on campus. So once there was some buzz, then they recruited well, and then the recruiting, it just sort of becomes almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, just all recruiting off each other. And so A&M needs to keep it up on the field, but as long as they show some life and don't, last year they lost some games they shouldn't have, with the LSU game and some others, but as long as they show some life, and now that they, injuries aren't an issue at quarterback at least, because I mean that nobody likes to hear excuses, but that's a legitimate one last year. I mean,
Yeah,
Zach
that
Calzada
is.
played out of his mind against Alabama, but other than that was not, did not have a great season, and he was not expected to be the starter and was just sort of thrown in there. So, you don't want to make excuses, but I mean, A&M didn't put its best product on the field last year. So this year should be different.
No doubt, and it also transitions into our good buddy Colin Kennedy. I thought did a really good look at speaking of another issue that A&M had last year at times was along the offensive line. And for those who haven't checked it out, he did a really good deep dive into um, position groups that don't have reason to be concerned along the offensive line. And it kind of came off a conversation he said that, talking with some friends and things like that about, well, what teams actually don't have a concern along the offensive line, and A&M was one of them. And I thought, brought up some good points that being able to build off Bryce Foster and Reuben Fothery is a heck of a start. But with those two guys obviously saw early
What's
playing time
crazy
last year.
is you aren't mentioning. I'm not really mentioning. Legan Robinson is
Yeah,
getting
I was about
preseason
to get to him. Yeah,
All-American accolades. He's also, I just saw a mock draft by an ESPN guy, had him as a first-round pick, and it's just like that just shows, man, how excited people are for those two freshmen, or I guess now rising sophomores, and Foster
yeah,
and Fothery, that they're not even talking about, a
Layden.
potential, it's way too early to do first round picks, but a potential
Yeah,
first round pick and potential All American guys, just even from fans of his own school, isn't getting a ton of attention.
just flies right under the radar. And you're right. I mean, he's a guy that when healthy last year, really stabilized the offensive line, is really good, obviously in the run game specifically. But A&M really has like a good foundation. It's not going to be like last year having to replace four guys and then injuries kind of step in and all that. And it just got out of whack around the middle of the season. The other guy, just when you and I were down at the camps, the other guy that really generated a lot of buzz was Trey Zune, talking with some people about Trey Zune. And I think there's a lot of people excited to see what he does. One person I spoke with said his athleticism is probably as good as anybody in the offensive line room. And so, I think having him stabilize that left tackle spot would be huge. Obviously, that was a weak spot for A&M last year. And then if you can kind of fill in the interior, I think Colin's right. This really could be an area of strength for A&M, and it was one of the things that allowed them to have that big season 2 years ago, was stability along the offensive line and
Oh
good
yeah,
play
A&M
there.
had the country's best offensive line that year. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's where it all starts. I'll tell you what, a guy that we saw at camps that I don't think this is his year because he's brand new to
yeah.
the spot. Ernest Crownover. When he walked in, I mean, so I first met him as a 230-pound, tight end, defensive end.
Oh, Demetrius
When
Cronover, you
Grand,
mean?
when no, yeah. Oh, sorry, yeah, sorry, I said Ernest.
Yeah.
Yeah, Demetrius Crownover.
I
Sorry,
was like, you're
Ernest's
going to get
older
people
brother.
excited about
No, no,
that
no,
running
no, no.
back
Yeah,
room now. Yeah.
no. Demetrius Crownover. I first saw him as a 230-pound tight end, defensive end, his sophomore year when Grandview won state. Now he's 6'7", 305. When he walked in, I mean, he looks like an NFL offensive tackle. He looks how you would build a first-round pick, with long arms, the height, the length. I mean, just he's still relatively lean despite being 305. I mean, if he picks up the position, I mean, he did block in high school playing tight end, but if he, it's a little different going from a high school tight end in a small school to the NSCC offensive tackle. But if he picks up the position, he has a chance to be really, really good.
Yeah.
Which
And I
isn't bad
think
for a guy that when they recruited him, they said, "Hey, we'll figure out what you are when you get to
yeah.
campus." Well, what he is an offensive tackle, and he looks like a really good one.
Yeah. And when we talked about him during the fall, going out and seeing him, we really talked about, if this guy could just put on some weight and be an offensive tackle, he has a chance to be a really, really special one. He's still picking up the position, but I think one encouraging sign with him, he's one of those guys that's been very, very vocal about working with Steve Adazio and the amount of things that he's already learned and picked up from Steve Adazio. I know he ended up going, Connor Stroh ended up committing to Texas this weekend, but his host was Demetrius Crownover, and he spent a lot of time talking about, all that he had learned. To him and Jordan Spasovich Moko were kind of the two guys that were really raving about getting to work with Steve Adazio, and both have extremely, extremely high ceilings. They're not quite there yet, I don't think, and still have more work to do. But that's an exciting development if you can get those two guys to play at the level that they can, and be patient with them. I'm with you. I think they both have their ceilings. The sky's kind of the limit for those two. And it would be a big development just in terms of, we've talked about it before as well, being able to develop offensive tackles and find offensive tackles right now. You have to be able to hit on some of those kind of project types and be able to develop them. And that would be a huge development for A&M if Demetrius Crownover can develop into kind of an NFL level offensive lineman, just in terms of where A&M is at the tackle spot.
No, for sure. And I mean, so you were talking about Adazio. I mean, watching him this spring, a lot of the drills they would go 6 wide, like on board drills and other things. And it was always the 5 starters. And then Demetrius was working. Cause I remember at first he was 80 something last year. So we're like, who is that kid? We didn't have a roster the first couple of days, but it was Crownover, and he was working as sort of the 6th offensive lineman and getting a ton of reps with the first team. And I think, that's big, and just, getting his confidence up and just getting, I mean, it's muscle memory, just, getting the blocking down and picking that up. And like I said, I don't think it's this year, but I think in 2023, man, I'm getting old. When 2023, I think he's one to definitely keep an eye on as a difference maker with the Aggies.
I'm totally with you. And it's when we kind of head down there next spring for spring practice, he's one guy that's going to be fascinating to watch. And the other one I would kind of keep an eye is obviously PJ Williams. I'm fascinated to see what a year in a weight room and what he kind of looks like.
He's never had it. He's never had an off season.
He's never had an off season
with basketball. So yeah,
to get him, I feel like he's a guy we could kind of be having this good discussion. Man, he looks really good now that he's put on that muscle and that weight, and kind of see where he is. And so those are two guys just in the future to keep an eye on, and both would be a real shot in the arm for A&M at the tackle spot. Looking ahead, it's decision time for a lot of recruits, and we'll have you covered on that front. July is going to be, like we talked about, coaches are going to want to get on vacation. So, stay on the site, and we'll have you up to date on all the latest there, over on Gig 'em 24/7. With SEC Media Days also right around the corner as well, when coaches kind of get back from vacation and all that. So we'll have you covered with all the latest. And we'll be back next week for the podcast as well to kind of recap everything. I'm sure there'll be a lot of news this week as kids continue to kind of look towards decisions. If you like the podcast, be sure to give us a like and subscribe on YouTube. Trying to get that up, and also give us a follow on iTunes and Spotify, and you'll get a notification every time a new podcast drops. So be sure to continue to stay tuned to the Gig 'em 24/7 Sports website for all the latest, and we'll have you covered there. And until next time, have a great week, and we'll see you guys soon.